The pregnancy test sat on the marble vanity like a loaded gun. 2 lines, clear as a verdict. Lady Lyra Whitcomb stared at it, her reflection ghostly in the gilded mirror behind her. Outside, February wind clawed at the windows of Blackwood Manor. Inside, silence. Thick, suffocating, expensive silence. She was carrying the heir to one of England's oldest estates. And the father? He hadn't touched her in 4 months. This wasn't a love story. This was a reckoning. If you want to see how far a woman can fall before she learns to fly, and how a man can lose everything by holding on too tight, stay with me. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button. You're going to need something to hold on to. The grandfather clock in the east corridor struck 6. Alara closed her eyes and counted the chimes. Each one a second she couldn't get back. Each one pulling her deeper into a life that felt like drowning in silk. She sat in what the staff called the ladies' sitting room, a phrase that sounded warm until you realized it meant the room where the lady sits because she has nothing else to do. Cream walls, tasteful watercolors, a writing desk she never used because there was no one to write to, 2 years of marriage, and she could count on one hand the number of real conversations she'd had with her husband, Lord Adrian Blackmore. Even his name sounded like a wall. The test was still in her pocket. She'd wrapped it in tissue paper, though she didn't know why. Habit, maybe. Ladies of Blackwood Manor didn't leave evidence lying around. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from something worse, hope. The stupid, stubborn kind that refuses to die even when you know better. Maybe this will change things. Maybe he'll... Stop it, she whispered to the empty room. Adrian didn't want a wife. He wanted a function. A well-dressed, well-mannered placeholder who knew when to smile at dinner parties and when to disappear. She'd learned to disappear very well. Footsteps in the hallway, measured, purposeful. She knew the rhythm, his valet, James, approaching with the morning schedule. A soft knock. Come in. James entered with a silver tray, tea, toast, a single envelope. His lordship requests your presence in the study at 9 o'clock, my lady. Alara's stomach dropped. Adrian never requested her presence. He tolerated it at formal events. He acknowledged it when estate business required a signature, but he didn't request it. Did he say why? James hesitated. Just a flicker, but she caught it. No, my lady. Liar. Kind liar, but still. She took the envelope. Her name in Adrian's handwriting, sharp, efficient, no wasted ink. Thank you, James. He left without meeting her eyes. Alara opened the envelope. 9 o'clock. Study. Bring nothing. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. They were numb. The study smelled like leather and old decisions. Adrian stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the grounds. Snow had started falling during the night. The gardens looked like something from a postcard, beautiful and completely lifeless. He didn't turn when she entered. Close the door. Alara did. The click echoed. She'd dressed carefully. Navy dress, pearls, hair pinned, the armor of a woman who'd learned that presentation was the only currency she had. Sit. She sat in the chair across from his desk. He still hadn't looked at her. The silence stretched. She'd gotten good at silence. It was the language of their marriage. Finally, he turned. Adrian Blackmore was 42, though he looked older, not from age, from rigidity. Every line of his face looked like it had been carved with a ruler, dark hair going silver at the temples, gray eyes that never quite seemed to focus on anything human. He'd been handsome once, probably. Now he was just sharp. I'll be direct, he said. This isn't working. Alara felt something crack inside her chest, not her heart, something deeper. The marriage, he continued, as if clarifying a business point, it was arranged with specific expectations. Neither of us pretended otherwise. She found her voice. It came out steadier than she expected. No, we didn't. 2 years is more than sufficient time to produce an heir. You're 28, healthy, according to every physician we've consulted. Yet here we are. The crack widened. Here we are, she repeated. Adrian sat down, finally, folded his hands on the desk like he was chairing a board meeting. I've consulted with my solicitors. An annulment can be arranged, discreetly. You'll be provided for. A house and bath, an income sufficient for comfort. Your family will be spared embarrassment. The official line will be incompatibility. Lyra stared at him. 2 years, 2 years of trying to be perfect, trying to be useful, trying to matter, and he was firing her. You're divorcing me because I haven't gotten pregnant. Annulment, he corrected. And yes, the tissue wrap test felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her pocket. She should tell him, right now. I'm pregnant. I'm carrying your heir, everything you claim to want. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he said provided for, like she was a servant being pensioned off. Maybe it was the 2 years of eating dinner in silence while he read correspondence. Maybe it was the fact that he still, even now, couldn't quite look at her. When? She asked. I've arranged for you to leave at the end of the week. James will help with packing. Take whatever you like from your rooms, jewelry, clothing, books. I'm not unreasonable. Not unreasonable. A laugh bubbled up in her throat. She swallowed it. And if I contest it? Now he looked at her, really looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time and wasn't particularly impressed with the view. Why would you? You've been miserable here. Don't pretend otherwise. He wasn't wrong. I haven't been happy, she said carefully, but I honored my commitments. To what end? We don't even like each other, Lyra. We barely speak. You spend your days in that sitting room doing what exactly? Reading, staring at wallpaper? This isn't a life for either of us. You never asked what I do with my days. Would it have mattered? The question hung in the air like smoke. Would it? She'd stopped trying to talk to him after the 6th month. Stopped trying to join him for breakfast after he'd walked out 3 times mid-sentence. Stopped trying to understand his work after he'd told her, politely but firmly, that estate business wasn't a lady's concern. She'd shrunk herself down to nothing, and he'd still found her too much. No, she said quietly. I suppose it wouldn't. Adrian nodded, like she'd confirmed something he already knew. Then we're in agreement. I'll have the papers drawn up. You can review them with independent counsel if you wish. I'll cover the expense. Everything will be handled properly. Properly, discreetly, reasonably, every word a knife wrapped in velvet. Lyra stood. Her legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Is that all? Yes. James will coordinate the details. She walked to the door. Her hand was on the knob when she heard him speak again. For what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this. She didn't turn around. No, you're not. You're relieved. She left before he could respond. The sitting room felt smaller than before. Lyra locked the door and sat on the floor, back against the settee, tissue wrap test in her hands. She should be crying. That's what women did in moments like this, wasn't it? Collapsed into grief, dramatic and helpless. But she wasn't crying. She was thinking. Adrian wanted an heir. He'd made that clear from the beginning. The marriage wasn't about her. It was about continuation, legacy, the precious Blackmore bloodline. She was pregnant with his son. She was sure it was a son. Don't ask her how, she just knew. If she told him now, everything would change. He'd cancel the annulment, keep her, probably even treat her marginally better, at least until the child was born. She'd be useful again, valuable. She'd also be trapped, forever, bound to a man who saw her as a function, who would pat her head for producing an heir and then go back to ignoring her existence. Who would raise their son to be exactly like him, cold, efficient, incapable of seeing people as anything more than pieces on a board. The baby moved, just a flutter. Impossible, probably, too early, but she felt it anyway. What kind of life is this for either of us? The thought arrived fully formed, like it had been waiting. She could tell him, save the marriage, secure her position, or she could leave, take the child, disappear, build something that belonged to her alone. It was insane. Ladies didn't just leave, not women in her position. Where would she even go? She had no money of her own, no family who would take her in without asking questions she couldn't answer. But staying meant teaching her son that love was transactional, that people were assets, that silence was safer than honesty. She unwrapped the test, stared at those 2 lines. You and me, she whispered. That's it. That's all we need. She was lying to herself. She knew it. But sometimes lying to yourself is the only way to find the truth. She spent 3 days planning. Adrian was traveling to London for estate business. He'd be gone for a week. Perfect. Lyra went through her jewelry box. Most of it was Blackmore family pieces, but there were a few things from her mother: a pearl necklace, a gold bracelet, a ruby ring that had belonged to her grandmother. Not much, but enough to sell if she was careful. She packed one trunk, practical clothes, nothing flashy, a few books, her mother's Bible, though she hadn't opened it in years. The hardest part was the staff. Mrs. Hendricks, the housekeeper, had been kind to her. Not warm, nothing at Blackwood was warm, but fair. The maids had treated her with distant respect. Even James, with his careful neutrality, had sometimes left small kindnesses by her door. Extra tea, a cushion for her back, notes about which rooms had the best light for reading. They would think she'd abandoned them. Or worse, they'd think she'd failed. On the 4th morning, she woke before dawn. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels like held breath. She dressed in traveling clothes, a simple wool dress, sturdy boots, a heavy cloak, pinned her hair. No jewelry except her mother's ring. The trunk was already by the servant's entrance. She'd moved it herself, in the middle of the night. One last walk through the manor. The grand staircase where she'd first entered as a bride, Adrian's hand cold in hers. The dining room where they'd sat at opposite ends of a table built for 20. The gallery with portraits of Blackmore ancestors, all of them looking vaguely disappointed. The sitting room. She stood in the doorway. 2 years. This was where her marriage had died, slow, quiet, invisible. She didn't leave a note. What would she even say? Oh, the morning coach to Dover left at 6. Lyra bought a ticket with cash she'd saved from the household allowance, tiny amounts Adrian never noticed. The driver helped her with the trunk without asking questions. The other passengers were working people. A clerk, a governess, a merchant with ink-stained fingers. No one recognized her. Why would they? Ladies of quality didn't take public coaches, but she wasn't a lady anymore. She was just a Lyra. 28, pregnant, running, free. The coach lurched forward. Through the window, she watched the countryside roll past. Stone walls, bare trees, fields waiting for spring. She pressed her hand to her stomach. "You're going to have a different life," she whispered. "I promise." The governess across from her smiled. "First child?" Lyra hesitated, then nodded. "How did you know?" "The way you're touching your belly, like you're already protecting them." The woman's smile turned wistful. It never stops, that feeling, even when they're grown. "Were you scared when you were pregnant the first time?" "Terrified." The governess laughed. "But also certain, like I'd finally understood what I was supposed to do. Does that make sense?" "Yes," Lyra said. "It does." The coach rattled on. Somewhere behind them, Blackwood Manor stood empty and perfect, waiting for a lady who would never return. Somewhere ahead, a future no one had planned was waiting to be built. Lyra closed her eyes and felt the baby flutter again. "You and me," she thought. "We're going to be fine." She was still lying to herself, but it was starting to feel like the truth. Dover smelled like salt and fish and new beginnings. Lyra found lodging at a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Talbot, a sharp-eyed woman who asked no questions as long as the rent was paid on time. "How long will you be staying?" Mrs. Talbot asked, showing her to a small room on the 2nd floor. "I'm not sure yet." "Running from something or toward something?" Lyra met her gaze. "Both." Mrs. Talbot nodded, like that was a perfectly reasonable answer. "Breakfast is at 7. No men in the rooms. No loud noise after 9. You look like you'll follow the rules." "I will." "Good. You need anything? I'm downstairs." The room was tiny. A narrow bed, a washstand, a window overlooking the street. It was perfect. Lyra sat on the bed and felt the tightness in her chest finally loosen. No one here knew her. No one here expected anything. She could be anyone. She could be herself. Whatever that meant. The first week was the hardest. Lyra had never been alone before, never made her own decisions without considering how they'd reflect on her family, her husband, her position. Now every choice was hers. what to eat, when to sleep, how to spend the day. It was terrifying. It was glorious. She sold her mother's bracelet to a jeweler in town. The man offered her half what it was worth. She took it anyway. She'd learned that negotiating required a position of power, and she had none. The money would last 3 months if she was careful. After that, she'd figure something out. She spent her days walking along the cliffs, breathing in the sea air, trying to imagine a future that didn't terrify her. At night, she read by candlelight. Not novels. She'd brought practical books. Accounting, estate management, things she'd watched Adrian do from a distance but never been allowed to touch. If she was going to survive, she needed to understand how money worked, how businesses worked, how the world worked when you didn't have a title protecting you. She was 3 weeks in Dover when the nausea started. Not morning sickness, she'd had that earlier, manageable. This was different, constant, debilitating. Mrs. Talbot found her one morning, pale and shaking, unable to keep down even water. "How far along are you?" the widow asked bluntly. 3 months, maybe 4. "And the father?" "Gone." Mrs. Talbot's expression didn't change. "There's a midwife in town, Mrs. Green. She's good, and she doesn't gossip. You should see her." "I don't have money for—" "I'll cover it. You can pay me back when you're on your feet." Alara's eyes burned. "Why would you do that?" Mrs. Talbot shrugged. "I was you once. Pregnant, alone, scared out of my mind. Someone helped me. Now I'm helping you. That's how it works. I'll pay you back, I swear." "I know you will. You've got that look." "What look?" "The one that says you'd walk through fire before you'd quit." Mrs. Green confirmed what Alara already knew. Healthy pregnancy. Strong heartbeat. No complications. Yet. "You're thin," the midwife said. "Need to eat more. Meat if you can afford it. Eggs, cheese. Growing a baby takes fuel." "I'll try." Mrs. Green gave her a long look. "You got people? Family?" "No." "The father's not coming back?" "No." "You're keeping the baby?" "Yes." The midwife nodded. "Then you need a plan. You can't just drift. Dover's not kind to women in your position." "What position is that?" "Unmarried, pregnant, genteel enough that people will notice you're out of place, but not connected enough to be protected." Mrs. Green's voice wasn't unkind, just factual. "You need income, real income. What can you do?" Alara thought about the sitting room, the endless, purposeless days. "I can read, write. I know Latin, French, a little Greek. I can manage accounts. I've watched it done." "Can you teach?" I don't know. Maybe. There's a school in town, St. Anne's. They're always looking for tutors for the merchant families. Pay's not great, but it's steady. I could put in a word." Hope flickered, dangerous, fragile. "Would you?" "I'll send a note today. But Alara—" Mrs. Green hesitated. "Whatever you ran from, whatever you left behind, make sure it was worth it. Because this life you're choosing, it's going to be hard. Harder than you think." Alara placed her hand on her stomach. It's worth it. She hoped that was true. St. Anne's School occupied a converted manor house on the edge of town. Alara arrived for her interview with her hair pinned tight, wearing the most respectable dress she owned. The headmistress, Miss Carlyle, was a woman in her 50s with keen eyes and the posture of someone who'd spent her life refusing to bend. "Mrs. Green speaks highly of you," Miss Carlyle said, scanning the letter of introduction, "though she's notably vague about your background. I prefer to let my qualifications speak for themselves." "Do you?" It wasn't a question. "Can you translate this?" She handed Alara a book, Virgil, in Latin. Alara read aloud, translating smoothly. She'd had excellent tutors as a girl, back when her family still had hopes of marrying her well. Miss Carlyle's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. "French?" Alara switched languages, reciting a passage from Molière. "Mathematics?" She answered a series of increasingly complex problems without hesitation. Miss Carlyle set down her pen. "You're overqualified for what I can pay you." "I need the work anyway." "Why?" Alara met her gaze. "Because I have a child coming, no husband, and a strong aversion to starving." A long silence. Then Miss Carlyle smiled, a small, sharp thing. Honesty. Refreshing. Most women in your position lie. She stood, extending her hand. You can start Monday. 3 students. Merchant children who need polish before they're sent to proper schools. 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. The pay is modest, but if you prove yourself, I can offer more. Lyra shook her hand, fighting the urge to cry from sheer relief. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The families are demanding. They'll expect miracles. Can you deliver? Yes. Then we'll see. Teaching saved her, not just financially, though the income was a lifeline, but mentally. For 2 years, she'd been useless, ornamental, a wife-shaped object that took up space and produced nothing. Now suddenly she had purpose. The students were challenging, bright but undisciplined, used to getting their way. But Lyra had been trained in patience, in maintaining composure under pressure, in making people want to please you. She taught them Latin through Roman history, French through cooking vocabulary, mathematics through household budgets. She made learning feel like power, not punishment. Within a month, parents were requesting her specifically. Within 2, Miss Carlyle offered her more students. You're good at this, the headmistress said. Better than good. You make them think they're discovering things on their own. That's the only way learning sticks. Where did you train? I didn't. I just remember what it felt like to be ignored, so I don't do that. Miss Carlyle studied her. You're running from something significant, aren't you? Yes. Is it going to come looking for you? Lyra thought of Adrian, of Blackwood Manor, of the life she'd left behind like a coat that didn't fit. I don't think so. I wasn't important enough to chase. Good. Because I'm starting to rely on you, and I hate losing good teachers. It was the closest thing to affection Lyra had heard in months. The pregnancy progressed. By 5 months, she couldn't hide it anymore. She told Miss Carlyle, expecting to be dismissed. Instead, the headmistress simply nodded. Will you keep teaching after the birth? If you'll have me. I will, though you'll need to arrange childcare. Mrs. Talbot offered to watch the baby during teaching hours. I raised 4 of my own. 1 more won't kill me. The community of women that formed around Lyra was nothing like the society she'd left. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't refined, but it was real. Mrs. Talbot, who covered her rent when money was tight and pretended not to notice. Mrs. Green, who checked on her weekly and never charged for the extra visits. Miss Carlyle, who assigned her the best-paying students and acted like it was pure coincidence. They didn't ask about the father, didn't judge her silence. They just helped. And slowly, Lyra began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could actually do this. On a cold November night, 7 months after leaving Blackwood Manor, Lyra went into labor. Mrs. Green arrived within the hour. Mrs. Talbot boiled water and fetched linens. The pain was worse than she'd imagined. Not just physical, though that was brutal, but emotional. She was alone. No husband holding her hand, no family waiting in the hall. Just her, Mrs. Green's firm voice, and the terrifying knowledge that after tonight, nothing would ever be the same. You're doing fine, Mrs. Green said, though Lyra was pretty sure she was dying. Just breathe. You're almost there. I can't. You can. You are. Now push. And Lyra did. She pushed with everything she had, every ounce of fear and anger and grief and stubborn, furious hope. The baby's first cry split the night. A boy, Mrs. Green announced, placing him on Lyra's chest. Strong lungs, good color. He's perfect. Lyra looked down at her son. He was tiny, wrinkled, covered in vernix and absolutely furious at being born. He was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Hello, she whispered. I'm your mother. We're going to be just fine. The baby wailed louder. Mrs. Talbot laughed. He's got opinions already. That's a good sign. Lyra couldn't stop staring at him, couldn't stop touching his tiny fingers, his soft hair, the impossible realness of him. She'd done it. Against all logic, all sense, all safety, she'd done it. What will you name him? Mrs. Green asked. Lyra hadn't thought about it. Names felt too permanent, too final. But looking at her son, one came to her immediately. Thomas, she said. After my father. Thomas Whitcomb. Not Blackmore. Never Blackmore. This child belonged to no one but himself. And her. Orchemt. The first weeks of motherhood were chaos. Lyra had read books, talked to other mothers, thought she was prepared. She wasn't. Thomas cried, constantly. He ate every 2 hours, which meant she never slept more than 90 minutes at a time. Her body hurt in ways she didn't know were possible, but every time she looked at him, sleeping in the drawer she'd converted into a cradle or nursing with his tiny hand gripping her finger, she felt something she'd never felt at Blackwood Manor. This is mine. This is real. Mrs. Talbot helped when she could, but she was old and running a boarding house. Miss Carlyle gave her 6 weeks before she needed to return to teaching. Money was tighter than ever. Lyra's savings were gone. The teaching income covered rent and food, barely. She'd sold everything of value except her mother's ring. She needed more. One night, after Thomas finally fell asleep, Lyra sat at the tiny table in her room and stared at the stack of student papers she needed to grade. Her eyes caught on something in the margin of one, a Latin phrase, incorrectly translated. She picked up her pen and corrected it, then paused. In the margin, she wrote a note. Not just the correction, but why it was wrong. The grammatical principle. A memory device to prevent the same mistake. She looked at the other papers, started adding notes. Not just corrections, explanations, insights. By morning, she'd transformed routine grading into something else entirely, a teaching tool that students could return to, learn from. The next day, one of her students' mothers stopped her after class. These notes you've been writing, my son actually reads them, says they help more than the lesson itself. An idea sparked. What if I made them longer, more detailed, like a study guide? I'd pay for that, extra, I mean. Others agreed. Within a month, Lyra was producing custom study materials, tailored to each student, building on their strengths, addressing their weaknesses. The extra income wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to buy better food, enough to save a little, enough to breathe. And late at night, when Thomas was asleep and the house was quiet, Lyra would sit at her desk and write. Not just study guides, essays, translations, analyses of texts she'd loved as a girl. She sent them to small journals, academic publications. Most were rejected, but some weren't. A translation of Catullus appeared in a literary magazine, an essay on women's education in a reform journal. Her name, Lyra Whitcomb, no title, no credentials, in print. She kept every copy, proof that she existed, that she mattered, not as someone's wife, not as someone's mother, just as herself. Adrian found out about the baby 6 months after Thomas was born. Lyra was in town, buying supplies, Thomas asleep in a sling against her chest. She turned a corner and nearly walked directly into James, Adrian's valet. Both of them froze. James's eyes went to the baby, then back to her face. His expression didn't change, but something flickered there. Recognition, calculation. Lady Lyra. Just Lyra now. Of course. I apologize. He hesitated. You look well. I am. And the child? Also well. Another pause. James was good at his job. Discreet, loyal, but he was also human. Does his lordship know? No. Will you tell him? Lyra looked down at Thomas, his small face peaceful in sleep. No. He would want to. He wanted an heir. He has no heir. Those are separate truths. James's mouth tightened. With respect, my lady, that's not entirely fair. Neither was our marriage. She moved to walk past him, but James spoke again. He's been different since you left. Quieter. He asks about you sometimes. What do you tell him? That I don't know where you went, which was true, until now. Lyra met his eyes. And now? James looked at Thomas again. Something complicated crossed his face. Now I still don't know anything. Relief flooded through her. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. His voice dropped. I'm doing it because that child deserves better than being pulled into Blackwood Manor before he's old enough to choose for himself. He tipped his hat and walked away. Lyra stood there, heart pounding, Thomas warm against her chest. She'd known this moment would come eventually, but not yet. Please, not yet. She went back to the boarding house and packed everything she owned. By morning, she and Thomas were on a coach heading north, toward a town where no one knew the Blackmore name, toward safety, toward whatever came next. The town of Ashford was smaller than Dover, quieter, the kind of place where strangers were noticed but not necessarily questioned, as long as they paid their bills and kept to themselves. Lyra rented a cottage on the edge of town. 2 rooms, a fireplace that smoked when the wind changed, and a roof that leaked in 3 places. The landlord, a farmer named Mr. Hewitt, asked no questions when she paid 3 months in advance with the last of her savings. "Husband?" he'd asked, eyes on Thomas. "Dead," she'd said. The lie came easier each time. Mr. Hewitt had nodded and handed over the key. That first night, Lyra sat on the floor with Thomas in her lap, surveying her new kingdom. Bare walls, uneven floorboards, a window that didn't quite close. It was the most beautiful place she'd ever lived. "We're going to make this work," she told Thomas, who responded by spitting up on her shoulder. She was down to her last pound note. No job. No connections. Winter was coming, and the cottage had exactly 1 blanket. But she was free. And freedom, she was learning, was expensive in ways she'd never imagined. The next morning, she wrapped Thomas in every piece of clothing she could spare and went into town. Ashford had 1 main street, a general store, a church, a public house that looked like it had been standing since the Normans invaded. And tucked between a butcher shop and a milliner, a small bookshop with a faded sign, Pembroke and Sons, New and Antiquarian Books. Lyra stopped. She'd sold almost everything, but she'd kept her books, the ones from her childhood, leather-bound editions of Cicero and Seneca and Ovid. They were the only things that felt like hers. She looked down at Thomas. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The bell over the door chimed when she entered. The shop was crammed floor to ceiling with books. They spilled from shelves, teetered in stacks, lay open on every available surface. It smelled like dust and ink and slowly decaying paper, the most comforting smell in the world. An old man emerged from the back, spectacles perched on his nose. "Help you?" Lyra set her bag on the counter. "I have some books I'd like to sell." He peered at her, then at Thomas. "Baby won't stop you reading, you know. Mine didn't." "I need the money." Something shifted in his expression. He pulled the books from her bag one by one, examining them with the care of a jeweler appraising diamonds. Latin, Greek, good editions, well maintained. He looked up. "You read these?" "Yes." "Understand them?" "Yes." He set them down. "I can give you £2 for the lot." It was robbery. They were worth at least 10. "Done," Lyra said. The old man, Mr. Pembroke, she assumed, counted out the coins slowly. "You'll regret selling these," he said. "People always do." "Probably. But you need to eat more than you need Cicero." "Right now, yes." He handed her the money, then paused. "You know Latin, Greek. Can you read French, German?" "French fluently, German adequately." "Can you write?" "Yes." Mr. Pembroke gestured to the chaos around them. "I've got 3 crates of foreign texts in the back. Estate sale. Previous owner died, family wants them gone. I can't read half of them, which means I can't price them, which means they're just taking up space I don't have." He fixed her with a sharp look. "You catalog those for me, title, author, language, condition. I'll pay you $1 per crate, and you can bring the baby. Long as he doesn't eat the merchandise." Lyra stared at him. "Why would you offer me that?" "Because I need the help, and you need the money, and I'm old enough not to care about the scandal of hiring an unwed mother." He shrugged. "Also, you didn't try to negotiate the price of the books, which means you're either desperate or honest. Both are useful qualities." "When can I start?" "Now if you want." Thomas chose that moment to start crying, a thin, hungry wail that made every head in the shop turn. Mr. Pembroke didn't flinch. "There's a storeroom in back with a chair and decent light. Feed him, then get to work. I'll make tea." It was the strangest job interview Lyra had ever had. It was also the best. She worked 6 hours that day. Thomas slept in a basket Mr. Pembroke found somewhere, surrounded by books like a particularly literate Moses. When he woke, she nursed him in the storeroom, then kept working with him balanced on her hip. The books were treasures, first editions, rare translations, volumes that hadn't been printed in decades. She cataloged each one meticulously, noting condition, publisher, estimated value. By closing time, she'd finished one crate. Mr. Pembroke examined her work. "This is good. Better than good. You've got an eye for this. My father collected books before—" She stopped. "Before we lost everything." "Ah, gentry fallen on hard times. Something like that. Well, gentry or not, you've just earned yourself a shilling, and if you want to come back tomorrow, there's 2 more crates waiting. I'll be here." Walking home, Thomas asleep against her chest, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not happiness, exactly, but possibility. The cottage was cold. The soup she made for dinner was thin. Thomas woke 3 times during the night. But she had work. Real work. Work that used her mind, not just her ability to sit quietly and look presentable. It was a start. Over the next weeks, Lyra fell into a rhythm. Mornings at Pembroke's, cataloging books and learning the trade. Afternoons writing, essays, translations, anything she could sell to the small journals that paid in pennies. Evenings with Thomas, teaching him nothing in particular but talking to him anyway, reading aloud from whatever book was within reach. Mr. Pembroke turned out to be more than just an employer. He was a teacher. "See this?" He'd hold up a book, show her the binding. "Calf leather means it's quality, but also means it's vulnerable to humidity. You store these wrong, they'll rot." Or, "Publisher's marks matter. This one," pointing to a small symbol on the title page, "means it's a first printing, could be worth 3 times what a second printing brings." He taught her how to spot forgeries, how to price based on demand, not just rarity, how to talk to customers, the collectors who wanted investment pieces versus the readers who wanted stories. "Books are funny," he said one afternoon, carefully repairing a torn page. Same object, different value depending on who's looking. To a scholar, this is a reference tool. To a collector, it's an asset. To someone like you or me, it's something else. What's that? Proof that thinking matters, that ideas outlive the people who had them. He glanced at her. "Why'd you really sell your books that first day?" "I told you, I needed money." "You needed money weeks before you walked in here. Why that day?" Lyra was quiet for a moment. Thomas was asleep in his basket, tiny fists curled under his chin. "I saw your shop and realized I had a choice. I could keep the books and starve while surrounded by beautiful ideas. Or I could sell them and use the money to build something that might, eventually, let me buy them back." "And which did you choose?" "I'm here, aren't I?" Mr. Pembroke smiled. "Smart girl. Too smart to be cataloging in a dusty bookshop forever." "I don't mind dust." "Maybe not. But you've got plans bigger than Ashford, I can tell." He was right. Late at night, when Thomas was finally asleep and the cottage was silent, Lyra would light a candle and spread her papers across the table. Lists. Calculations. Dreams written in practical terms. She'd cataloged enough books now to understand their value. Knew which types sold, which gathered dust. Knew the margins Mr. Pembroke worked with. How much he paid at estate sales. How much he charged customers. There was money in books. Not fortune, but enough. And she was good at this. Better than Mr. Pembroke even, though she'd never say it to his face. She had the education to spot quality and the hunger to work harder than anyone else. If she saved enough, if she learned enough, if she was careful and smart and lucky, she could do this herself. The thought was intoxicating, terrifying, real, but she needed capital, more than she could earn a shilling at a time, which meant she needed to take a risk. Mr. Pembroke mentioned an estate auction happening in 3 weeks, a manor house being sold off after the owner died without heirs. The family wanted everything gone. Furniture, art, books. "I'm going," he said. "See if there's anything worth bidding on. You're welcome to come if you want. Learn how these things work." Lyra went. The manor was small by Blackwood standards, but still impressive. Rooms full of objects that had once meant something to someone and now meant nothing to anyone. She watched Mr. Pembroke bid on a collection of medical texts, watched him lose to a London dealer who had deeper pockets. But she also watched the other bidders, saw who was buying what, noticed the lots that went unsold, not because they lacked value, but because they lacked presentation. There was a trunk of books in the corner. estate miscellany. No one had bothered to sort through it. The auctioneer described it as assorted reading material, condition unknown. It went for 10 shillings. Ilara's heart raced. She had 12 pounds saved, every penny she'd earned at Pembroke's, plus what remained from selling her mother's pearl necklace. It was supposed to be for rent, for food, for the inevitable crisis. But looking at that trunk, she saw something else. Opportunity. The next auction was in 2 weeks. Another estate sale, bigger this time. She studied the catalog Mr. Pembroke brought back. Lot 47. Library contents, approximately 200 volumes, various conditions, no details, no list of titles, just bulk disposal. The estimate was 15 to 20 pounds. Everyone would assume it was worthless, the good books already pulled out and sold separately. But what if they'd missed something? Ilara made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. She asked Mr. Pembroke if she could borrow his cart. What for? I'm going to bid on lot 47. He stared at her. With what money? Mine. Ilara, that's a gamble. You don't know what's in there. Neither does anyone else. Which means if I'm right, I win. And if I'm wrong, I learn an expensive lesson. And if you're wrong, you can't pay rent. Then I'll figure something out. I always do. Mr. Pembroke was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. You're going to give me a heart condition. But yes, you can borrow the cart, and I'll come with you. Someone needs to keep you from bankrupting yourself completely. The auction was chaos. Dealers from London, local collectors, scavengers looking for quick profit. The lots moved fast, prices climbing higher than the estimates. Lot 47 came up late in the day. Library contents, 200 volumes, various conditions. Do I hear 15 pounds? Silence. Ilara's hand went up. 15 pounds. Do I hear 16? A dealer in the back raised his hand, barely looking up from his notes. 16, 17? Ilara nodded. 17. 18? The dealer raised his hand again. This went on for 3 more rounds. By the time they hit 22 pounds, Ilara's entire body was shaking. She had 25 pounds total. If she went higher than that, she'd have nothing left. 22 pounds. Do I hear 23? The dealer hesitated. Ilara held her breath. Going once, going twice. 23, the dealer said. Damn. 24, Ilara said, her voice barely working. The dealer looked at her for the first time, saw a young woman with a baby on her hip and doubt in her eyes. He smiled and raised his hand. 25. Ilara's heart stopped. She was out. She'd lost. Mr. Pembroke leaned close. I can lend you, no. She couldn't borrow, not for this. If she failed on her own terms. Going once? Ilara looked at Thomas, at his small, perfect face. She'd left a manor, left a title, left security. For what? So she could make the same safe choices everyone expected? 26, she said. Mr. Pembroke made a strangled noise. The dealer's smile faded. He studied her, calculating, then shook his head. Going once, going twice, sold to the young lady for 26 pounds. Ilara's knees nearly gave out. She'd just spent money she didn't have on books she hadn't seen. She was either brilliant or insane, possibly both. Mr. Pembroke helped her load the boxes onto his cart. There were 5 of them, heavy and sealed with wax. Please tell me you know what you're doing, he muttered. I have absolutely no idea. Wonderful, that's just wonderful. They brought the boxes back to her cottage. By the time they unloaded everything, it was dark and Thomas was screaming from hunger. Mr. Pembroke left, shaking his head. Open them tomorrow, when you've slept or prayed or whatever it is foolish women do before they discover they've ruined themselves. Ilara waited until Thomas was fed and asleep. Then she lit every candle she had and opened the first box. The smell hit her first, mildew and old leather and something else. Age, maybe. History. She pulled out the first book. Water damage, spine cracked, unsellable. The second was worse. Third, fourth, fifth. Her hands started shaking. She'd miscalculated. Badly. The 6th book was a French romance, pages stuck together from humidity. 7th, 8th, worthless. All of it. She wanted to cry, or scream, or throw the whole lot into the fireplace and watch 26 pounds burn. Instead, she opened the second box. More of the same. Damaged books, common titles. Nothing rare, nothing valuable. Box 3, 4. Lyra was numb by the time she reached the fifth box. She'd ruined herself, lost everything betting on her own judgment. She pulled out the first book from the last box almost mechanically, then stopped. The binding was plain, brown leather, no gilt. But the weight was wrong, too heavy for its size. She opened it carefully. Manuscript. Handwritten. Latin. Her pulse quickened. She turned to the title page. De Natura Rerum. On the nature of things. She recognized the text. Lucretius. But this wasn't a printed edition. This was a copy. Illuminated. 15th century, if she was reading the script right. Her hands were shaking again, but for a different reason. She pulled out the next book. Another manuscript. This one in Greek. Then another. And another. The entire fifth box was manuscripts. Someone's private collection, probably mixed in with the regular library by accident. Lyra sat back, heart pounding. She had no idea what they were worth. But manuscripts like these didn't appear at country estate auctions. They appeared at specialist sales in London. With expert authentication, proper presentation, she might have just bought her future, or she might be hallucinating from exhaustion and desperation. Only one way to find out. The next morning, Lyra brought one manuscript to Mr. Pembroke. He took one look and went pale. "Where did you get this?" "Lot 47. This is..." He adjusted his spectacles, examining it closely. "This is museum quality. Do you understand? This isn't bookshop merchandise. This is worth something? Worth a lot of somethings." He looked up. "How many of these do you have?" 15. Mr. Pembroke sat down heavily. "You terrifying woman. You actually did it." "I got lucky. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. You were prepared." He handed the manuscript back carefully. "But you can't sell these here. You need London. Specialist dealers, auction houses." "I've never been to London. I don't know anyone there." "I do." He pulled out a piece of paper, started writing. "Edmund Cross. Runs a rare book gallery in Mayfair. He's honest, which is rare in this business. Tell him I sent you. He'll give you fair value." Lyra stared at the address. "I can't just show up at a gallery with a baby and a box of manuscripts." "Why not? You showed up here." "That was different." "How?" She didn't have an answer. Mr. Pembroke leaned forward. "You've got something real here, possibly significant. You can sit on it, safe and scared, or you can take it to London and see what it's actually worth. Your choice." Lyra looked at the manuscript in her hands. She'd gambled everything once already. What was one more risk? "If I go to London, will you watch Thomas?" Mr. Pembroke blinked. "You'd trust me with your son." "You haven't let me starve yet. I'm assuming you won't let him starve either." "For a few hours I can manage, but just a few. I'm old and babies are exhausting." "It'll take me a day, maybe 2. Then you'd better bring enough milk." 3 days later, Lyra stood outside Cross Rare Books on a street that smelled like money. Thomas was with Mr. Pembroke. She'd left detailed instructions, half her wardrobe converted into diapers, and a promise to return by nightfall tomorrow. Now she stood here, clutching her best manuscript, wearing the only decent dress she still owned, trying not to look like exactly what she was, a desperate woman with no credentials hoping someone would take her seriously. The gallery was intimidating, polished wood, soft lighting, a silence that felt expensive. A clerk approached, young, impeccably dressed, looking at her like she'd wandered in from the street by accident. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Mr. Cross. Mr. Pembroke from Ashford sent me." The clerk's expression didn't change. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "Mr. Cross doesn't see walk-ins." "He'll see this." Lyra set the manuscript on the counter. The clerk glanced at it. "We don't purchase. Just show it to him, please." Something in her voice must have registered. The clerk hesitated, then picked up the manuscript. "Wait here." He disappeared into the back. Lyra waited. 5 minutes. 10. She was about to leave when the clerk returned, followed by a man in his 60s with wild gray hair and ink-stained fingers. "You're from Pembroke?" Mr. Cross asked, already opening the manuscript. "He recommended you." Mr. Cross didn't respond. He was reading, turning pages with the careful intensity of someone examining a holy relic. Finally, he looked up. Where did you get this? Estate auction. Which estate? Does it matter? It does if it's stolen. It's not. I have the bill of sale. She pulled out the auction receipt. Mr. Cross examined it, then looked back at the manuscript. Do you know what this is? A 15th century copy of Lucretius, probably Italian. The illuminations suggest you've studied this. I've studied Latin. The rest I'm guessing. Mr. Cross closed the manuscript carefully. You guessed correctly. This is extraordinary. Museum quality. Possibly unique. He paused. How many more do you have? 14. His expression shifted. Of this quality? I don't know. I'm not an expert. But you knew enough to buy them. I knew enough to gamble. Mr. Cross studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real smile, not the professional kind. I like you. You're either very clever or very lucky. Either way, I can work with that. He gestured toward the back. Bring the rest. I'll assess them properly. If they're what I think they are, we'll talk terms. What kind of terms? The kind that might change your life, assuming you're willing to trust me. Lyra thought of Thomas, of the cottage with 3 leaks, of the future she was trying to build from nothing. I'm willing. She went back to Ashford, collected the manuscripts, and returned to London the next day. Mr. Cross examined each one, made notes, asked questions about provenance she couldn't always answer. By the end, he looked exhausted and exhilarated. I need to consult with some colleagues, verify authenticity. But if these are genuine, and I believe they are, you're looking at substantial value. How substantial? £200, maybe more. Lyra's vision went blurry. For all of them? For each. She sat down before she fell down. £200 per manuscript. 15 manuscripts. £3,000. More money than she'd ever imagined having. More than her father had lost in his worst year. More than Adrian had given her as an annulment settlement. I'll need time, Mr. Cross said. Authentication takes weeks, sometimes months. But I can offer you in advance, say £500 against the final sale. £500. She could live for 2 years on that. Buy a real house, start a real business. Why would you do that? Lyra asked. You don't know me. No. But Pembroke vouched for you, and his word is gold. And more importantly, Mr. Cross smiled. You took a risk, a smart one. That tells me you understand value. And I'd rather work with someone who understands value than someone who just inherited it. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal? Lyra looked at his hand, at the manuscript spread across the table, at the future suddenly, impossibly within reach. She shook. We have a deal. She returned to Ashford with a bank draft in her pocket and a contract that would change everything. Mr. Pembroke handed over Thomas, who'd apparently spent the entire time screaming with visible relief. Did it work? He asked. It worked. How well? She told him. He sat down, stood up, sat down again. You terrifying woman, he said, finally. What are you going to do now? Lyra looked around the bookshop, at the shelves she'd learned to navigate, at the man who'd given her a chance when no one else would. First, I'm going to pay you back for the cart rental. I didn't charge you for the cart. I'm paying you anyway. With interest. She paused. And then I'm going to ask if you'd consider a partnership. Mr. Pembroke stared. What kind of partnership? The kind where I provide capital and you provide expertise. We expand, start dealing in rare books seriously. Not just what wanders in, but what we seek out. Build something real. You want to go into business with an old man in a dying town? I want to go into business with the person who taught me everything I know. Location we can change later. Mr. Pembroke was quiet for a long time. Then he smiled. Your husband, the dead one. Did he know what he was losing? Lyra thought of Adrian, of Blackwood Manor, of the woman she'd been when she lived there. No, she said. He never even looked. Within 6 months, Pembroke and Whitcomb had outgrown the cramped shop in Ashford. They moved to larger premises in Oxford, a city with universities, libraries, and the kind of clientele that understood the difference between a book and a treasure. The new shop occupied 3 floors of a building near the Bodleian. Ground floor for sales, second for rare acquisitions, third for Alara's office, and a small apartment where she and Thomas lived. It wasn't grand. The stairs creaked, the windows rattled in winter. But it was hers. Thomas was walking now, careening around the shop with the unstable enthusiasm of a drunk sailor. He'd pull books off lower shelves, babble at customers, occasionally try to eat the merchandise. The regulars found him charming. Alara found him exhausting. Mr. Pembroke had officially retired, though he showed up most days anyway, claiming he was just checking inventory before spending 6 hours reorganizing the classical texts. "You're paying me too much," he'd grumble. "You taught me everything. I'm paying you exactly right." Stubborn woman, learned from a stubborn man. The business was thriving. Word spread among collectors that Pembroke and Whitcomb specialized in manuscripts and rare editions, and more importantly, that they could be trusted. Alara had a gift for authentication that impressed even the most skeptical dealers. She could spot a forgery from across a room, price a collection with uncanny accuracy. But success brought visibility. And visibility brought risk. She'd been careful. Used her maiden name. Avoided social circles where someone might recognize her. Kept Thomas out of sight during important meetings. But Oxford wasn't London, and it wasn't Ashford. It was a place where the gentry and the academic world intersected, where people asked questions. "Mrs. Whitcomb," a customer had said one afternoon, examining a first edition Dante. "Forgive my curiosity, but is your family the Whitcombs from Sussex?" "No," Alara had lied smoothly. "Different branch entirely, much less interesting." "Ah, pity. I knew a Whitcomb once, so lovely family. Fell on hard times, I heard." She'd smiled and changed the subject, but the questions were coming more frequently. Then, on a Tuesday in late October, James walked into her shop. Alara was at the counter, cataloging a new acquisition. She looked up at the sound of the bell and froze. He looked older, grayer, but unmistakably him. "Lady Alara, just Alara." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "We established that in Dover, remember?" James glanced around the shop, taking in the shelves, the customers, the obvious success. "I remember, though I confess I expected to find you in more modest circumstances. People's expectations of me have always been disappointingly low." He almost smiled. "May we speak privately?" "No." "It concerns his lordship." "Then definitely no." But Thomas chose that moment to toddle out from the back room, clutching a wooden horse Mr. Pembroke had carved for him. He crashed directly into Alara's skirts, grabbed her leg for balance, and looked up at James with wide, curious eyes. James went very still. Thomas had Adrian's coloring, the same dark hair, the same sharp features that would, in 20 years, probably make him look exactly like his father. "This is Thomas," Alara said quietly. "Say hello, darling." Thomas waved, then went back to his horse. James's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes: recognition, calculation, grief. "How old?" 18 months. "He looks like his father, I know." A customer approached the counter. Alara served them with practiced ease, completed the sale, wrapped the book. The whole time James waited. When the shop was empty again, Alara called to the back room. "Mr. Pembroke, can you watch Thomas for a moment?" The old man appeared, took one look at James, and frowned. "Everything all right?" "Fine, just business." Mr. Pembroke scooped up Thomas and disappeared, but not before giving James a look that clearly said, "I know where to hide a body." Alara led James to her office on the 3rd floor. It was small: desk, 2 chairs, shelves crammed with catalogs and correspondence. Through the window you could see the spires of the university. She didn't sit. Neither did he. "Why are you here?" she asked. "His lordship sent me." "To do what? Drag me back?" "Because I assure you that won't work." "To find you, that's all. He's been looking." "For 18 months?" "Longer. Since you left. But the trail went cold in Dover. It took time to..." "To what? Piece together that I was still alive? That I hadn't thrown myself in the ocean?" James flinched. He was concerned. He was relieved. Don't rewrite history to make him look better. "You're right." James's shoulders sagged slightly. He was relieved. At first, the annulment went through quietly. He remarried within the year. Lyra felt nothing. Not hurt, not anger, just a distant curiosity. Anyone I know? Lady Catherine Ashford, 22, impeccable lineage. They were married in September. Then he's got what he wanted, an heir-producing wife who knows her place. She miscarried 3 months ago. Now Lyra felt something. Not satisfaction. She wasn't cruel, but a grim understanding. And now he's interested in his first wife again? How flattering. It's not like that, isn't it? He discarded me when I was useless. Now his new model isn't working, so he's sniffing around the old one. James was quiet for a moment. He doesn't know about Thomas. Good. Lyra, don't. She held up a hand. Whatever you're about to say, don't. I left. I built this. And I'm not going back to being invisible just because Adrian's having regrets. He's not having regrets. He's having a crisis. James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd never seen from him before. The estate is failing. His new wife despises him. The marriage is a disaster, and everyone knows it. He's been asking about you, where you went, if you're well, if you ever... Stop. But James kept going. He told me if I found you, I should tell you he was wrong, about everything. Lyra laughed. It came out harsh. He sent you all this way to deliver an apology he couldn't be bothered to make in person? He doesn't know I'm here. This is my own initiative. That stopped her. James met her eyes. I watched you disappear, watched you shrink down to nothing in that house. And I did nothing. Because it wasn't my place. Because I told myself you'd adjust. You'd learn to live with it. His voice cracked slightly. Then you left, and I realized you were the bravest person in that entire godforsaken manor. And I was a coward for not helping you. You helped me in Dover. You kept my secret. That was the bare minimum. What I should have done was tell his lordship he was destroying something precious. But I was loyal to him, not to what was right. Lyra sat down slowly. Why tell me this now? Because you deserve to know that leaving was the right choice. You're thriving. That boy downstairs is healthy and happy. You've built something real. James gestured to the shop around them. This is more than Blackwood Manor ever was. More alive, more honest. Then why are you here? If you think I made the right choice, why risk telling Adrian where I am? I haven't, and I won't. James pulled an envelope from his coat. But there's something you should know. The estate, it's in trouble. Bad investments, mismanagement. Adrian's drowning. Within the year, Blackwood Manor will be sold. Lyra took the envelope. Inside was a letter. Legal language, but the gist was clear. Adrian was being forced to liquidate assets to cover debts. Why would I care about this? Because Thomas is his son, his heir, and when the estate goes under, there will be nothing left to inherit. James leaned forward. I'm not asking you to go back. I'm asking you to consider whether your son deserves to know his father before there's nothing left to know him for. Adrian doesn't deserve Thomas. Maybe not, but Thomas might deserve the choice. The words hit like a slap. Lyra stared at the letter, at the numbers, at the reality that Adrian, cold, efficient, untouchable Adrian, was failing. Get out, she said quietly. Lyra, get out. Tell Adrian you couldn't find me. Tell him I'm dead. Tell him whatever you want, but don't come back here. James stood, hesitated. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it. He left. Lyra sat alone in her office, staring at the letter, until Mr. Pembroke knocked on the door. He's gone? Yes. Good. I didn't like his face. The old man paused. You all right? No. Want to talk about it? No. Want me to take Thomas for the evening so you can drink and cry in peace? Despite everything, Lyra smiled. Yes. Please. That night, after Mr. Pembroke took Thomas home with him, Lyra sat in the shop with a bottle of wine and the letter. She'd spent 18 months building a life where Adrian didn't exist, where Blackwood Manor was a bad dream she'd woken up from. Now it was crashing back. Not because Adrian wanted her, she didn't believe that for a second, but because Thomas existed. Her son, who looked exactly like his father, who would someday ask questions she didn't want to answer. Where's my father? Why doesn't he know about me? Why did you keep us apart? She'd convinced herself she was protecting him, giving him a better life. But was she? Or was she punishing Adrian by denying him his son, and in the process, denying Thomas his father? The thought made her sick. She poured another glass of wine. The shop bell chimed. Lyra looked up, startled. It was past 10. The shop was closed. A woman stood in the doorway. Young, mid-20s, beautiful in that brittle, expensive way. Blonde hair, pale skin. Eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in months. "We're closed," Lyra said. "I know. I picked the lock." The woman's voice was cultured, exhausted. "You're Lyra Whitcomb." "Who's asking?" "Lady Catherine Blackmore." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Adrian's wife." Lyra set down her glass very carefully. "How did you find me?" "Followed James. He's terrible at being discreet when he's upset." Catherine looked around the shop. "This is impressive. Really. I wasn't expecting—" "What? Competence? Success? Evidence that I survived without your husband?" "Any of it." Catherine's facade cracked slightly. "James said you had a child." "That's none of your business." "Is it Adrian's?" "I said it's none of your business." Catherine laughed, a brittle, broken sound. "You don't understand. I need to know, because if you have his child, if you can prove it, then maybe what? He'll leave you and come back to me? I don't want him." "I know. That's why I'm here." Catherine sat down without being invited. "I need your help." "Absolutely not. Just listen, please." The younger woman's hands were shaking. "The marriage is a nightmare. He's cruel, not physically. He'd never. But everything else. The silence. The criticism. The constant feeling that you're failing some test you didn't know you were taking." Every word landed like a stone, because Lyra remembered all of it. "That doesn't make us allies," Lyra said carefully. "No, but it makes us the same." Catherine leaned forward. "He's going to lose everything, the estate, the title, all of it, and when he does, he'll destroy me trying to save it, unless what? Unless you give him what he wants." Lyra went cold. "You want me to hand over my son?" "No, God, no. I want you to use your son as leverage." Catherine pulled out papers, legal documents dense with clauses. "Adrian needs an heir, a legitimate one. If you can prove Thomas is his, if you negotiate properly, you can get him to sign over control, not custody, control of the estate assets. Protect them for Thomas, and in return, he gets to claim his son without losing everything." "That's insane. That's survival for all of us." Catherine's eyes were desperate. "I'll sign whatever you want. Renounce any claim. Testify that the second marriage should be annulled. Whatever it takes. Just get me out." Lyra stared at her, at this woman who was living her old life, who was drowning in the same silence. Why would Adrian agree to any of this? Because he's desperate. The creditors are circling. His new investments failed. He's out of options. Catherine's voice dropped. And because somewhere under all that ice, he knows he failed you. James told me Adrian's been asking about you for months. Where you went, whether you're safe. He won't admit it, but he regrets what happened. Regret isn't love. No, but it's a crack. And cracks can be leveraged. Lyra wanted to say no. Wanted to throw Catherine out, burn the papers, go back to her safe, separate life. But the truth was simpler and uglier. Thomas would grow up. He'd ask questions, and eventually he'd learn that his mother had kept him from his father out of pride and pain, unless she gave him the choice. "I need to think about this," Lyra said. "How long?" "I don't know, a week, maybe more." Catherine stood. "I'll wait. But Lyra, Adrian doesn't know I'm here. If he finds out, he won't hear it from me." The young woman paused at the door. "I hope you know how lucky you are to have escaped, to have built this." She looked back, and for a moment her mask fell completely. "I wish I'd been brave enough to do the same." Then she was gone. Lyra sat in the dark shop, surrounded by books and silence and impossible choices. She could stay hidden, keep Thomas safe, protect the life she'd built, or she could go back, face Adrian. and risk everything on the chance that 18 months had changed him enough to matter. The wine bottle was empty. Her son was asleep at Mr. Pembroke's house, dreaming toddler dreams. And somewhere, in a failing manner, the man who'd thrown her away was learning what it meant to lose everything. Lyra made her decision. She just wasn't sure yet if it was brave or stupid, probably both. The next morning, she sent a letter to James. 3 words. We need to talk. His response came within hours. When and where? They met in a coffee house near the Bodleian. Neutral ground, public enough to be safe, private enough to be honest. James arrived looking haggard. Catherine came to see you, he said without preamble. She did. I didn't tell her where you were. I know, she followed you. He closed his eyes. I'm getting old and sloppy. You're getting humans. It's not the same thing. Lyra stirred her tea. Tell me the truth. How bad is it? The estate? Worse than Catherine probably told you. Adrian made investments that didn't pan out, trusted the wrong people. The debts are substantial. If you can't pay by the end of the year, the manor goes to auction. Everything else gets liquidated. And the title? Meaningless without the estate. He'll still be Lord Blackmore, but it won't mean anything. James met her eyes. He's breaking. I've known him 20 years and I've never seen him like this. Desperate. Afraid. Good. Is it? Because the man I'm watching self-destruct isn't the cold bastard who signed your annulment papers. He's someone who made a mistake and doesn't know how to fix it. Lyra set down her cup. What exactly are you asking me to do? Come back. Not to the manor. To the negotiating table. Use what you have. Your son. Your success. The fact that you're the one person who walked away and survived. James leaned forward. Make him face what he did. And maybe, if you're feeling generous, give him a chance to be better. Why would I do that? Out of pity? Out of pragmatism. If the estate collapses, there's nothing for Thomas to inherit. If you negotiate now, while Adrian still has something to lose, you can secure your son's future, and maybe— He hesitated. Maybe give Adrian the chance to know his child before it's too late. You're assuming he wants that. I'm assuming he doesn't know what he wants. But he deserves the chance to figure it out. Lyra was quiet for a long time. Outside, students hurried past, carrying books and dreams and uncomplicated futures. If I do this, she said slowly, it's not for Adrian. It's for Thomas. So someday when he asks about his father, I can honestly say I gave him the option to know. That's all I'm asking. And I want control, not shared, not negotiated. Full control of Thomas's inheritance. Adrian gets visitation, supervised at first, but I make the decisions. He'll fight that. Then he loses everything, including his son. Lyra met James's eyes. I'm not the girl who left Blackwood Manor. I'm not afraid of him anymore. And I won't be invisible. So if he wants this, if he wants any chance at knowing Thomas, he agrees to my terms. All of them. James smiled slightly. You terrify me. You know that? Good. I've been working on it. When do you want to meet him? Lyra thought of Thomas, of the shop, of the life she'd built brick by careful brick. Saturday, here in Oxford, neutral ground. And James, if he brings lawyers or tries to intimidate me, I walk. This is a conversation between two people, not a negotiation between a lord and his discarded wife. I'll make sure he understands. Will he come? Are you joking? When I tell him you're willing to meet, he'll ride through fire to get here. Then tell him to bring his checkbook, because this conversation won't be free. Saturday came too fast. Lyra dressed carefully. Not the clothes of a lady, but the clothes of a businesswoman. Simple dress. Hair pinned. Her mother's ring, the only jewelry she wore. She looked competent, formidable. She looked like someone who couldn't be dismissed. Mr. Pembroke watched Thomas in the shop. You sure about this? He asked. No. Good. Certainty is for fools. He handed her a folder. Contracts. In case he agrees to terms. I had a solicitor draw them up. Everything you asked for. You're a good man. I'm a nosy old busybody who can't stand watching talented women underestimate themselves. Now go, make him cry. The meeting was at a private room in the Randolph Hotel. James had arranged everything. Lyra arrived exactly on time. Adrian was already there. He stood when she entered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He looked terrible, thin, older. The rigid composure she remembered had cracked, leaving something raw and uncertain underneath. "Lyra," he said, just her name. But the way he said it, like he'd been holding it in his mouth for 18 months and finally had permission to speak. She sat down without acknowledging the weight in that single word. "Adrian." He sat across from her. James stood by the door, silent. "Thank you for coming," Adrian said. "I'm not here for you. I'm here for my son." He flinched. "I didn't know you were pregnant." "I know. If I had, you would have kept me, like a broodmare, useful again." Lyra folded her hands on the table. "Let's not pretend this would have been different. You wanted an heir, not a wife. I gave you the chance to have both. You chose the heir." "That's not fair." "No. Fair would have been you asking me what I wanted. Fair would have been treating me like a person instead of a function." She kept her voice level, professional. "But we're not here to relitigate the past. We're here to discuss the future." Adrian looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. "You've changed," he said quietly. "I left. That changes a person. You're stronger. I'm exactly who I always was. You just never bothered to look." Silence. Then Adrian did something she'd never seen him do. He looked down. "You're right. About all of it." Lyra's breath caught. He struggled with the words. "I was so focused on duty, on legacy, on maintaining what my father built. And I convinced myself that was enough, that a marriage was just another contract to execute properly. It was. For you. And I destroyed you in the process." His hands shook slightly. "I've made a lot of mistakes, Lyra, but losing you was the worst." "You didn't lose me. You threw me away." "I know." He looked up, and his eyes were red. "I know. And I've spent every day since realizing what I did, trying to find you, trying to—" His voice cracked. "I'm sorry. It's not enough. It doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." Lyra sat very still. This was what she'd wanted, wasn't it? An admission, an apology. Proof that leaving had mattered. But hearing it felt hollow, because sorry didn't give her back 2 years, didn't erase the night she'd cried herself to sleep, didn't rebuild the trust he'd never earned in the first place. "I have a son," she said quietly. "Thomas. He's 18 months old. He has your eyes." Adrian's face went white. "Can I—" "No. Please, Lyra, let me see him. Just once." "Why? So you can decide if he's worth your time? So you can calculate his value? So I can meet my son. He's not yours. Not yet." Lyra pulled out the contracts. "You want to be his father? You earn it. Here's how." She laid out her terms. Full control of Thomas's inheritance in a trust she managed. Adrian would have no access without her approval. Visitation rights? Supervised initially, then increasing based on Thomas's comfort and Adrian's behavior. No attempts to claim custody or challenge her authority. And financial support. Not charity, but restitution for the 18 months he'd abandoned them. Adrian read through the contract slowly. "This gives you everything," he said. "Yes. I have no power, no control. Welcome to the last 2 years of my life." He looked up. "You're punishing me. I'm protecting my son. If you see those as the same thing, that tells me everything I need to know." Adrian set down the papers. "What if I refuse?" "Then you never meet Thomas. You lose the estate. You lose everything. And someday, when he's old enough to ask about you, I'll tell him the truth, that his father chose pride over his son." "That's not fair." "No, but it's honest." Lyra leaned forward. "You taught me something, Adrian. You taught me that people will take as much as you let them. So I'm not letting you take anything. If you want to know your son, you do it on my terms. And if you don't like it, there's the door." The room was silent except for the clock ticking on the mantel. Adrian looked at the contracts, at James, at Lyra. Then he picked up the pen. "Where do I sign?" Lyra watched Adrian's hand move across the paper. Each signature felt like a small earthquake, shifting the ground beneath 18 months of carefully constructed independence. James witnessed, signed his own name, gathered the documents into a leather folder. "I'll have these filed with the solicitors tomorrow," he said quietly. "The trust will be established within the week." Adrian hadn't looked up. He was staring at his own signature like it belonged to someone else. "When can I meet him?" he asked. "When I decide you're ready." His jaw tightened. "I signed your papers. I agreed to everything." "You agreed to the possibility, not the guarantee." Lyra stood. "I'll contact James when I'm ready to arrange a meeting. It might be a week. It might be a month. It depends on whether I think you can handle it without damaging him." "I'm his father." "Being a father isn't about biology. It's about showing up, consistently, without conditions." She picked up her bag. "You spent 2 years proving you don't know how to do that, so now you get to prove you've learned." She left before he could respond. In the hallway, her hands were shaking, not from fear, from the sheer weight of what she'd just done. She'd walked into a room with the man who'd broken her and walked out with everything she'd demanded. It felt like victory. It felt like vertigo. James caught up with her at the stairs. "That was brutal. It was necessary." "He's not a bad man, Lyra. Just a damaged one." "I know, but Thomas doesn't need a damaged father. He needs one who's learned to be better." She paused. "Can Adrian do that?" "I don't know. But for the first time in 20 years, I think he actually wants to try. Wanting isn't enough. No, but it's a start." Lyra went back to the shop. Mr. Pembroke took one look at her face and poured her tea without asking. Thomas was asleep in the back room, curled up with his wooden horse. "How'd it go?" Mr. Pembroke asked. "He signed everything." "Good. Did he cry?" "Almost." "Even better." The old man sat down across from her. "What now?" "Now I figure out if I just made the biggest mistake of my life." "You gave your son options. That's never a mistake. Even if one of those options is a father who might destroy him?" "You won't let that happen. You're too stubborn." Lyra smiled despite everything. "You have a lot of faith in my stubbornness. It's gotten you this far." Over the next 2 weeks, Lyra prepared. She didn't tell Thomas about his father yet. He was too young to understand. But she started talking about family in abstract terms, about how some people lived far away but still cared, about how sometimes adults made mistakes and had to work hard to fix them. Thomas mostly ignored these conversations in favor of knocking over book displays. She also prepared herself. Late at night, after Thomas was asleep, she'd rehearse the meeting in her mind. What she'd say, how she'd react if Adrian tried to take over, if he disappointed her, if he surprised her. She was ready for him to fail. She wasn't ready for him to succeed. The letter came on a Thursday. Not from James, from Adrian directly. The handwriting was different than she remembered, less precise, more human. "Lyra, I know you're not ready. I know I haven't earned the right to ask, but I'm writing anyway because silence feels like surrender. I've spent the last 2 weeks thinking about everything you said. You're right, about all of it. I was cruel. Not intentionally, which somehow makes it worse. I treated you like a problem to solve instead of a person to know. I've been trying to understand why. My father raised me to believe emotion was weakness, that duty was everything, that people existed to fulfill roles, not to be messy and complicated and human. I believed that for 42 years. And then you left and suddenly the role was empty, and I realized I had no idea who you actually were, what you liked, what you wanted, whether you were happy or miserable. I'd spent 2 years living with you and never once asked. James told me about your shop, about Thomas, about the life you built from nothing. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me try to be someone worth knowing, not as your husband, that's gone, and I understand why, but as Thomas's father, as someone who wants to do better than the man who failed you. I'll wait as long as you need, a week, a year, forever, if that's what it takes. I just want the chance to try. A. Lyra. Read the letter 3 times. It was the most honest thing Adrian had ever written to her. No formality, no distance, just raw, awkward honesty. She folded it carefully and put it in her desk drawer. Then she wrote back. Adrian, Sunday, 2 p.m. My shop in Oxford. You'll have 1 hour with Thomas, supervised by me and Mr. Pembroke. If he's uncomfortable, you leave immediately. If you make promises you can't keep, this ends. Don't bring gifts. Don't try to impress him. Just be someone he can trust. If you can't do that, don't come. Sunday arrived cold and gray. Alara dressed Thomas in his best clothes, or what passed for best in a toddler's wardrobe. Clean trousers, a little jacket Mr. Pembroke's daughter had sent, shoes he'd already scuffed beyond recognition. We're meeting someone today, she told him. Someone important. Thomas was more interested in his breakfast. He's your father. Do you know what that means? Papa? Sort of. He's someone who's been away for a long time, but he wants to meet you. Thomas considered this. Toys? No toys, just talking. Boring. Despite her anxiety, Alara laughed. Yes, probably boring. Mr. Pembroke arrived early to help prepare. They set up the shop's small reading room, comfortable chairs, good light, some of Thomas's toys scattered around to make it feel less formal. You're nervous, Mr. Pembroke observed. Terrified. He's going to be fine. Kids are resilient. I'm not worried about Thomas. I'm worried about me. Alara sat down heavily. What if I can't do this? What if seeing Adrian with him just breaks something? Then we throw him out and try again later. Or never. Whatever you need. You make it sound simple. It is simple. You're just overthinking because you're smart. Smart people always complicate things. At exactly 2 o'clock, the shop bell chimed. Adrian entered alone. No James. No entourage. Just him, looking smaller somehow than she remembered. He saw Thomas first. The boy was building a tower out of blocks, tongue sticking out in concentration. He didn't look up. Adrian froze. Alara watched him take in his son, the dark hair, the sharp features, the way Thomas frowned when a block wouldn't balance exactly right. He looks like you, she said quietly. He looks furious at that block. He gets that from you too. Adrian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Thomas's tower collapsed. He looked up, saw Adrian, and went very still. Who's that? He asked Alara. She knelt beside him. Remember I told you about someone who wanted to meet you? This is Adrian. He's your father, Adrian said. His voice cracked slightly. I'm your father. Thomas stared at him, then looked at Alara for confirmation. She nodded. Thomas went back to his blocks. He doesn't understand, Adrian said, sounding lost. He's 18 months old. He doesn't understand much beyond hunger and gravity. Alara gestured to a chair. Sit. Don't expect conversation. Just be here. Adrian sat. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Thomas built. Adrian watched. Mr. Pembroke pretended to reorganize shelves while obviously eavesdropping. Then Thomas's tower collapsed again. He made a frustrated noise. May I? Adrian asked, gesturing to the blocks. Alara nodded. Adrian got down on the floor, awkward, unused to moving in ways that weren't rigidly controlled. He picked up a block. The base needs to be wider, he said to Thomas. Like this, see? More stable. Thomas watched, copied the placement. The tower went higher. Adrian added another block. Your turn. Thomas placed one carefully. It held. Good. Now another. They built together, slowly, silently. Just blocks and basic engineering and two people learning each other's rhythm. Alara felt something crack in her chest. Not love, not forgiveness, but possibility. When the tower finally fell, because all towers fall eventually, Thomas laughed. A bright surprise sound. Adrian laughed too, rusty, uncertain, but real. Again, say, Thomas demanded. Again, Sergean, Adrian agreed. They built 4 more towers, each one taller than the last. By the end, Thomas was leaning against Adrian's leg, using him like furniture. The hour passed faster than Alara expected. When it was over, Adrian stood slowly. Thomas protested. I have to go now, Adrian told him. But I'll come back, if that's all right with your mother. Thomas looked at Alara. Again? Maybe. We'll see. Adrian moved toward the door. stopped, turned back. "Thank you," he said to Alara. "For this. For letting me—" His voice failed. "Don't thank me yet. This was the easy part. What's the hard part? Showing up next week and the week after, and every week until he knows he can count on you." She met his eyes. "Can you do that?" "Yes." "You sound certain." "I am, because I've already lost you. I'm not losing him too." After Adrian left, Mr. Pembroke whistled low. Well, that was unexpectedly not terrible. It was 1 hour. 1 hour where he didn't make a single mistake. That's something. Thomas was already distracted, playing with his horse. He'd forgotten about Adrian entirely, but Alara hadn't. She kept seeing the look on Adrian's face when Thomas laughed, the careful way he'd placed each block, the fact that he'd gotten on the floor without being asked, something the old Adrian would have considered beneath him. Maybe people could change, or maybe this was just an act, a temporary performance to get what he wanted. She'd know soon enough. Adrian came back the following Sunday, and the one after that. He was consistent, prompt, patient with Thomas's short attention span and complete lack of interest in anything resembling structured activity. By the 4th visit, Thomas started looking for him, running to the door when the bell chimed, disappointed when it was just a customer. By the 6th, he called Adrian Papa. It happened casually. Thomas was showing Adrian a bug he'd found, and he said, "Look, Papa. Legs." Adrian went very still, then looked at Alara. She shrugged. She hadn't taught him that. "Yes," Adrian said quietly. "Lots of legs. That's a beetle." Thomas lost interest immediately, but the word stuck. Papa. The business with the estate was resolved faster than expected. Adrian followed through on every term of their contract. The trust was established. Thomas's inheritance secured. The creditors were paid off using funds Adrian had somehow scraped together. Lyra didn't ask how, and he didn't offer. Blackwood Manor was saved. Barely, but saved. Catherine got her annulment. She sent Alara a letter. Brief, grateful, relieved. "Thank you for giving me an exit. I hope someday I'm half as brave as you." Alara filed it away with the other evidence that she'd done the right thing, but success brought new problems. People in Oxford were starting to ask questions about Adrian's regular visits, about Thomas's parentage, about why a wealthy lord was spending every Sunday in a bookshop playing with a child who clearly shared his features. The gossip started small. A comment here, a raised eyebrow there. Then it appeared in print. A society column in London mentioned Lord Blackmore's mysterious weekly visits to Oxford and rumors of a natural son. Natural son, the polite term for bastard. Mr. Pembroke brought her the paper. "You've been noticed." Alara read the column twice. "They think Thomas is illegitimate." "Well, technically, we were married when I conceived him. He's not illegitimate, he's just hidden." Hidden children of dissolved marriages tend to attract speculation, especially when the father is nobility. What do I do? You could ignore it, let people think what they want. Or you could control the narrative. Tell the truth on your terms before someone else tells it on theirs. Alara thought of Thomas, of the life he'd have if people thought he was a bastard, the doors that would close, the whispers that would follow him. She'd protected him from poverty, from abandonment, from a father who didn't deserve him. But she couldn't protect him from gossip, unless she met it head on. She wrote to Adrian that night, "We need to talk." Not about Thomas, about the story people are telling. He arrived the next day. They met in her office, door closed, Thomas safely with Mr. Pembroke downstairs. "The papers," Adrian said. "I saw. They think he's illegitimate." "I know. I'll issue a statement, clarify the timeline." "That won't work. People will do the math. They'll realize I left you while pregnant and never told you. That makes me either a liar or a manipulator." "You were protecting yourself." "I was. But that's not how it'll read." Alara leaned forward. "We need a better story. Something that protects Thomas and explains the gap." "What kind of story?" She took a breath. "The truth, or a version of it." "Which is?" "We married young. It didn't work. I left, quietly, to avoid scandal. You granted me the separation, I was pregnant but didn't realize until after I'd gone. By the time I knew, I'd built a life and didn't want to disrupt it by returning. She met his eyes. Recently, we reconnected for Thomas's sake. We're not reconciling romantically, but we're cooperating as parents. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. That's remarkably close to the actual truth. The best lies usually are. It leaves you looking reasonable. It makes me look like the villain who let you go. You were the villain who let me go. He flinched. Fair. The question is whether you're willing to take the blame publicly. Let people think you're the one who failed. They'd be right. I know, but admitting it in a society column is different than admitting it to me. Adrian stood, walked to the window, looked out at the Oxford streets. If we do this, if we tell this story, what happens to Thomas? He becomes legitimate, protected, the acknowledged son of Lord Blackmore and his first wife. No scandal, no whispers. And you? I become the woman who left. Some people will admire that, others will judge. I can live with both. Can you, really? Lyra thought about the cottage in Dover, the boarding house, and the night she'd gone to bed hungry so Thomas could eat. I've lived through worse. Adrian turned. I'll do it. I'll take responsibility, publicly, whatever you need. Why? Because you've given me a son, a chance to know him, a purpose beyond just maintaining an estate. His voice was steady. The least I can do is protect his reputation. This will make you look weak, failed. People will talk. Let them. I've spent my whole life worried about what people think. It hasn't made me happy. It hasn't made me good. He met her eyes. Maybe it's time to try something else. The statement went out 3 days later. Lord Adrian Blackmore formally acknowledged Thomas Whitcomb as his legitimate son from his first marriage to Lyra Whitcomb. The marriage had ended amicably due to incompatibility. Lady Lyra had relocated to establish her own business and had been with child at the time, though unaware. Upon discovering the pregnancy, she'd chosen to raise the child independently rather than return to a marriage that hadn't served either party. Recently, Lord Blackmore and Lady Lyra had reconnected for their son's benefit. While not reconciling romantically, they were committed to co-parenting. The statement was accompanied by legal documents proving the timeline. Marriage certificate, annulment date. Thomas's birth record, carefully backdated with the help of a sympathetic physician who'd confirmed Lyra's story. Everything technically legal, everything strategically positioned. The response was immediate. Some papers praised Adrian for acknowledging his son despite the irregular circumstances. Others criticized him for letting Lyra go in the first place. A few questioned her decision to keep the child secret, but the overall narrative stuck. Complicated marriage, amicable separation, responsible co-parenting. Thomas was legitimate, protected, safe. The business impact was unexpected. Pembroke and Whitcomb suddenly became fashionable. People wanted to meet the woman who'd walked away from a lord and built her own empire. Collectors who'd never noticed the shop before started requesting appointments. The increased attention meant increased sales. Within a month, Lyra had to hire additional staff. Within 2, she was turning away customers. You're successful, Mr. Pembroke observed. Insufferably so. Is that a problem? Only for my retirement. You keep growing. I'll have to come back full time. Would that be so terrible? Ask me when my joints aren't screaming. But he was smiling. The shop expanded again, this time to a second location in London. Lyra didn't want to leave Oxford, so she hired a manager, a sharp young woman named Margaret, who had opinions about everything and the skills to back them up. You're building something real, Margaret said during her interview. I want to be part of it. It's books, not revolution. Books are revolution, just slower. Lyra hired her on the spot. Adrian continued his weekly visits. They developed a routine. He'd arrive at 2, play with Thomas for an hour, then stay for tea while Thomas napped, and he and Lyra would talk. At first, the conversations were stilted, careful. They discussed Thomas's development, his health, his preferences. But gradually, they started talking about other things. The business, the estate, books they'd read, opinions they'd never shared when they were married. I never knew you liked poetry, Adrian said one afternoon. You never asked. I never asked about anything. No, you didn't. He was quiet for a moment. I'm trying to understand why. What was wrong with me that I couldn't see you? Nothing was wrong with you. You were raised to value duty over people. That's not a flaw, it's training. It's still inexcusable. Maybe, but understanding it helps. Does it? Help, I mean. Lyra considered. It helps me forgive you, not completely, but enough to work with you. That's more than I deserve. Probably. But Thomas deserves a father who's trying, so I'm giving you the chance. These conversations felt like archaeology, excavating the ruins of their marriage to understand what had failed and why. It didn't change the past, but it changed how they moved forward. One Sunday, 6 months after their first meeting, Adrian arrived with a question instead of his usual quiet competence. Thomas's birthday is next month, he said. I'd like to host a party at Blackwood Manor. Small. Just family and close friends. Lyra set down her tea. That's a terrible idea. Why? Because that place is full of ghosts, mine specifically. Then maybe it's time to exorcise them. By throwing a birthday party? By showing him and you that it's different now, that I'm different. Adrian leaned forward. I've been working on the manor, clearing out the old, making space for new things. I want you to see it. Why? Because you should know what your son will inherit. And because... He hesitated. Because I think you'll be surprised. Lyra didn't want to go. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, but Thomas deserved to see his father's home, deserved to understand that part of his heritage. And maybe, just maybe, she needed to see if Adrian had actually changed or if this was all performance. Fine, she said, but if it's the same cold mausoleum I left, we're not staying for cake. Fair. The drive to Blackwood Manor took 2 hours. Thomas fell asleep in the carriage, head on Lyra's lap. She watched the countryside roll past and felt time sliding backward. How many times had she made this journey as a new bride? Full of hope, convinced she could make it work. She'd been so young, so stupid. The manor appeared over the hill, and Lyra braced herself, but something was different. The gates were open. The gardens, which had been formal and severe, now had wildflowers mixed in with the roses. The fountain in the courtyard was running, something Adrian had always kept off to preserve the mechanics. They pulled up to the entrance. Adrian was waiting. Welcome back, he said. Lyra stepped down, Thomas in her arms. The boy woke up, looked around with wide eyes. Big house, he announced. Very big, Lyra agreed. Inside, the changes were more dramatic. The heavy drapes were gone, replaced with lighter fabrics that let in actual sunlight. The portraits of disapproving ancestors had been moved to a single gallery instead of looming over every hallway. The formal receiving room where Lyra had spent so many silent afternoons was now a library, floor-to-ceiling books, comfortable chairs, a fireplace that looked actually used. You redecorated, she said. I tried to make it feel less like a museum. Adrian watched her face. Is it better or just different? It's lighter. That was the goal. He showed them through the house. The changes were everywhere, small things mostly, but they added up to something that felt almost welcoming. The dining room table had been replaced with a smaller one. I got tired of eating alone, Adrian explained. This seats 8 instead of 20. The sitting room, her old prison, had been converted into a music room. A piano, some string instruments, sheet music scattered around. I didn't know you played, Lyra said. I don't, but Catherine did. After she left, I realized I'd never actually asked her about her interests either, so I'm trying to pay attention to what people value. Music apparently is valuable. They ended up in the garden. Adrian had set up a small party, tables with food, some decorations, a handful of people Lyra didn't recognize. Who are they? She asked. Staff, tenants, people who actually live here instead of just managing it. He crouched down to Thomas's level. Happy birthday, little man. Want to see your present? Thomas nodded enthusiastically. Adrian led them to a small building near the garden. A cottage, really. Recently renovated. It's yours, he told Lyra. If you want it, a place to stay when you visit, private, separate from the main house. Your space. Lyra stared at the cottage, at the garden around it, at the care that had clearly gone into making it comfortable. You built this for me? For you and Thomas, so you'd have somewhere safe when you're here, somewhere that isn't haunted. She felt tears building and pushed them back. Well, why? Because you deserve to feel welcome in your son's home. And because, Adrian's voice cracked, because I want you to know that I'm trying. I know I failed you. I know sorry isn't enough, but I'm trying to build something better, not for me, for both of you. Thomas had already run inside the cottage, exploring with the fearless enthusiasm of a toddler. Lyra stood in the garden she'd once hated and felt the weight of 18 months shift. Not disappear, not forgive completely, but shift. It's a start, she said quietly. Adrian smiled, tentative, hopeful. A start is more than I thought I'd get. The party was small, intimate. Thomas destroyed his cake with the efficiency of a tiny barbarian. The guests laughed. The sun set over gardens that finally felt alive. And Lyra realized something. She'd come here expecting to hate it, expecting to find proof that Adrian hadn't changed, that this was all manipulation. Instead, she found a man who was trying, imperfectly, awkwardly, but genuinely. It wasn't love, it wasn't even forgiveness, but it was possibility. And for the first time since leaving, Lyra thought maybe, just maybe, she'd done more than survive. She'd won. The cottage became a ritual. Every other weekend, Lyra and Thomas would make the journey to Blackwood Manor. They'd stay in the small house Adrian had built, separate, safe, theirs. Thomas would spend mornings with his father, learning to ride the ancient pony Adrian had found somewhere, or helping the groundskeeper plant vegetables he'd immediately forget about. Afternoons, Adrian would join them for tea. Sometimes they'd talk. Sometimes they'd just exist in the same space while Thomas destroyed whatever was within reach. It wasn't a marriage, it wasn't even a friendship exactly, but it was something functional, something that worked. The business continued to grow. The London location was thriving under Margaret's sharp management. Lyra had started consulting for private collectors, authenticating manuscripts, advising on purchases, occasionally brokering deals that made her monthly income exceed what Adrian had given her as an entire yearly allowance. She'd bought the building that housed the Oxford shop, owned it outright, her name on the deed. Mr. Pembroke had officially retired this time, though he still showed up to argue about cataloging systems and complain that she was expanding too fast. "You're going to overextend," he'd grumble. "You said that 6 months ago." "I was right 6 months ago, too. You just got lucky." Luck is preparation meeting opportunity. Don't quote me at myself. It's disrespectful. But he was proud. She could tell by the way he'd show customers around, casually mentioning that the owner built this from nothing, you know. Thomas turned 2, then 3. He grew from a toddler into a small boy with opinions about everything and the self-preservation instincts of a lemming. He called Adrian Papa and Lyra Mama, and seemed blissfully unaware that his family situation was unusual. Until the day he came home from the village school and asked, "Why don't you and Papa live together?" Lyra was in her office, reviewing acquisition proposals. She set down her pen carefully. "What brought this on?" "Henry says his mama and papa live in the same house. Why don't we?" She'd known this conversation would come eventually. She'd prepared speeches, explanations, gentle ways to explain divorce to a child. All of them evaporated. "Your father and we tried living together once, before you were born. It didn't work very well." "Why?" "Because we weren't very good at talking to each other. We didn't know how to be kind." Thomas considered this with the seriousness only a 3-year-old could muster. "Are you good at it now?" "Better. We're getting better." "Then why not try again?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "It's complicated, sweetheart." That's what grown-ups say when they don't want to explain. She laughed despite herself. "You're right, it is." She pulled him onto her lap. "The truth is, your father and I hurt each other. Not on purpose, but we did. And even though we're friends now, that doesn't mean we should live together." "But you're not scared of him anymore." Lyra went still. "What makes you think I was scared?" "You get tight. Here." Thomas touched her shoulders. "When we first started visiting, but you don't anymore." She'd never realized he'd noticed. "You're very observant." "That's what Mr. Pembroke says. He says I see things." "He's right." She kissed the top of his head. "I'm not scared anymore. But that doesn't mean we need to live together to be a family. We're already a family, just a different kind." "Okay." Thomas squirmed off her lap. already distracted by something else. Can I have biscuits? One. And don't tell Mr. Pembroke. He ran off, and Alara sat alone with the question still echoing. Why not try again? Because she'd built a life. Independence. Safety. Because going back felt like surrendering. Because she didn't trust it. Because maybe she was scared after all, just of different things. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the cottage at Blackwood, about the gardens Adrian had replanted, about the way he'd learned to listen when Thomas talked, really listen instead of just waiting for his turn to speak, about the man he was becoming versus the man he'd been. She got up, lit a candle, and started writing. Not a letter. Just thoughts. Questions she didn't have answers to. What if Thomas is right? What if we could try again, not as we were, but as we are now? What would that even look like? Can people really change that much? Can I? She wrote until dawn, then burned the pages. Some questions didn't need answers yet. The turning point came in spring. Alara had traveled to London for an auction, a private estate sale with several manuscripts she'd been tracking. Margaret was managing the shop. Thomas was with Adrian for the week. Everything was arranged. The auction went well. She acquired 3 pieces, outbid a dealer from Paris on a 4th, and was feeling professionally triumphant when a messenger found her at her hotel. Mrs. Whitcomb? Urgent message from Blackwood Manor. Her stomach dropped. The note was from James, not Adrian. Short, direct. Thomas fell from the pony. Doctor's been called. He's asking for you. She was on a coach within the hour. The journey to Blackwood took 3 hours. Each minute felt like drowning. Thomas was fine. He had to be fine. He was young, resilient. Falls happened, but the fear was irrational and absolute. She arrived at sunset. James met her at the door. He's all right, he said immediately. Bruised, scared, but all right. Alara pushed past him. Thomas was in the drawing room, wrapped in blankets on the sofa. Adrian sat beside him, looking like he'd aged 10 years. Mama! Thomas tried to sit up, winced. She was across the room in seconds, pulling him into her arms as gently as possible. I'm here. I'm here. What happened? The pony spooked. I fell. He was trying very hard not to cry. It hurt. I know, sweetheart, I know. I'm sorry I scared you. You didn't. Her voice cracked. You have nothing to apologize for. Over Thomas's head, she met Adrian's eyes. He looked wrecked. The doctor arrived, examined Thomas, confirmed nothing was broken. Keep him quiet for a few days. No writing until the bruises heal. He'll be fine. After the doctor left, after Thomas finally fell asleep, Alara found Adrian in his study. He was standing by the window, hands shaking. I should have been watching more carefully, he said, without turning. I was distracted, and he's a child. They fall. Not on my watch. Not when he's my responsibility. Adrian, it was an accident. He turned. His face was streaked with tears he hadn't bothered to hide. When James told me he'd fallen, when I saw him lying there, he couldn't finish. I thought I'd lost him, and all I could think was that I'd wasted so much time, so many chances to know him. And if something had... Alara crossed the room, put her hand on his arm. But he didn't. He's fine. This time. Every time. That's parenting. Constant, low-level terror that something will happen. How do you stand it? I don't. I just keep moving. Adrian looked at her hand on his arm. You came immediately, dropped everything. Of course I did. You didn't have to. He's safe here. I would have... I know, but he's my son, and when he's scared, he needs me. She paused. He needs you too. You know that, right? He was calling for both of us. Was he? James said so in the note. Adrian sat down heavily. I don't know what I'm doing. As a father, I keep thinking I'm going to ruin him the way my father ruined me. You won't. How can you be sure? Because you care whether you will. That's the difference. He was quiet for a long moment. I've been thinking about what you said, about us being different now. Adrian, I'm not asking to reconcile. I'm asking... He struggled with the words. I'm asking if you think we could ever be more than this. More than scheduled visits and careful boundaries. Alara sat down across from him. What would more look like? I don't know. Partnership, maybe. Real partnership. Not the contract we had before, but something built on actual trust. We have trust now, or we're building it. Do we? Or are you just tolerating me for Thomas's sake? She considered lying. It would be easier. But easier didn't build the kind of relationship Thomas deserved to see. At first, yes, I was tolerating you. But somewhere in the last year, she stopped. You've changed, really changed. The man I married would never have admitted he was scared, would never have cried in front of me, would never have asked what I wanted. Is that enough? I don't know. Ask me again in a year. A year, Adrian repeated. That's fair. Nothing about this is fair. We're making it up as we go. Then we're doing it well, because Thomas is happy. You're thriving, and he smiled slightly. I'm learning to be human. How's that going? Terribly, but I'm trying. That night, Alara stayed at the manor, not in the cottage, in the house itself, in a guest room near Thomas's so she could hear him if he woke. She couldn't sleep. Around midnight, she gave up and went downstairs. The library was lit. Adrian's doing. He'd started keeping it welcoming instead of decorative. She found him there, reading by firelight. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. Too much adrenaline. There's tea. James made extra. She poured herself a cup, sat in the chair across from him. They didn't speak for a while. Finally, Adrian set down his book. Can I ask you something? You're going to anyway. Fair. He hesitated. Do you ever regret it, leaving? No? Not even a little? Not for a second. Leaving saved me. She met his eyes. But I sometimes wonder what would have happened if you'd been then who you are now. We'd probably have been happy. Maybe. Or maybe we both needed to break first. Is that what we did? Break? You broke me. I broke free. Then we both had to rebuild. She paused. I think we're better now, separate, even if we're learning to be together. That's depressingly optimistic. That's reality. They talked until dawn. About Thomas. About the business. About the estate and its future. About small things that felt enormous in the firelight. When the sun finally rose, Alara realized something. This was what marriage should have been. This ease, this honesty. They'd had to destroy everything to find it, but they'd found it. Over the following months, the boundaries shifted. Not dramatically, not a sudden reconciliation. But gradually, Alara found herself staying at the manor more often, bringing work there, using the cottage less as a retreat and more as an office. Thomas started spending equal time in both places. Oxford with his mother, Blackwood with his father. It wasn't traditional, but it worked. The business expanded again. A third location in Edinburgh. Partnerships with universities for manuscript preservation. Alara's reputation as an expert grew beyond what she'd ever imagined. She was invited to lecture, to consult on museum acquisitions, to write articles for academic journals. People started calling her Professor Whitcomb, even though she had no formal degree. She didn't correct them. Adrian attended one of her lectures, a talk on Renaissance manuscripts at Oxford. He sat in the back, quiet, watching her command a room full of scholars with the same ease she'd once used to catalog his library. Afterward, he waited while she fielded questions from eager students. When they were finally alone, he said, "You were magnificent." I was nervous. It didn't show. Good. That was the point. They walked back to the shop together. Spring evening, Oxford in full bloom. I'm proud of you, Adrian said. I don't think I've ever said that. You haven't. I should have. Earlier. Often. He stopped walking. Alara, I know things are complicated, but I need you to know something. What? I was wrong. About everything. About what marriage should be. About what you were capable of. About what mattered. His voice was steady. You were never the problem. I was. And watching you become this, he gestured at the world around them. Watching you build an empire from nothing while I nearly destroyed everything I inherited, it's humbling. You didn't destroy everything. You saved it. Barely. And only because you showed me what real strength looks like. Alara felt something shift. Not love. Not yet. but recognition. We're not the same people we were, she said quietly. No, we're better. At least, I hope I am. You are? You're learning. Is that enough? She thought about Thomas, about the cottage, about the life she'd built and the life she could have. Ask me tomorrow. He smiled. Tomorrow. I can do that. The decision came slowly. Not a single moment, but an accumulation. Thomas asking why they didn't live together. Adrian showing up for her lectures. The way the cottage had started to feel less like sanctuary and more like separation. The way she'd stopped flinching when Adrian entered a room. The way he'd learned to ask instead of assume. The way they'd built something neither of them had words for yet. One evening, after Thomas was asleep, Lyra found Adrian in the garden. I've been thinking, she said. Dangerous. Usually. She sat beside him. What if we tried? Tried what? Living together. Actually together. Not visits, not separate houses. Together. Adrian went very still. Are you serious? I don't know yet. That's why I'm asking. What changed? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She pulled her knees up. I spent 2 years being invisible in this house, then 18 months proving I didn't need it, and now? Now I think maybe the point isn't whether I need it, it's whether I want it. Do you? I want Thomas to see his parents as partners. I want him to grow up knowing what healthy partnership looks like, and I want… She stopped. I want to see if we can build something real, not what we had before. Something new. What if we fail again? Then we fail. But at least we'll have tried as our actual selves instead of the people we thought we should be. Adrian was quiet for a long time. I don't deserve this chance. Probably not. But Thomas deserves parents who are trying. So here we are. Here we are, he repeated. Then, what would you need to make this work? Honesty, space when I need it, equal partnership in decisions about Thomas. And she met his eyes. I need you to keep growing, keep learning, keep being better than who you were. I can do that. Can you? Really? I've spent 3 years learning how. I'm not stopping now. Then we try. They didn't kiss, didn't embrace. Just sat together in the garden while night fell and the future rearranged itself around them. The move happened gradually. First, Lyra started keeping more belongings at the manor, then a desk in the library, then half her wardrobe. Mr. Pembroke managed the Oxford shop, Margaret the London location. Lyra oversaw both from Blackwood, traveling when necessary. Thomas was delighted. We're all together now? He'd asked. We're trying to be, Lyra had said. Good. I like it better this way. It wasn't perfect. They fought. About money, about Thomas's education, about whether the East Wing needed renovating or should be left alone. But they fought honestly. No silent treatment, no cold distance. Just two people who'd learned, painfully, how to be honest. One night, after a particularly heated argument about whether Thomas was old enough for a real pony, Adrian said, "This is what it should have been like before." What? This. Fighting about real things, caring enough to disagree. You're saying you enjoyed that argument. I'm saying I enjoyed you caring enough to have it. Lyra threw a pillow at him. He caught it, grinning. We're not good at this yet, she said. No, but we're better. Better is something. Better is everything. 6 months in, Lyra woke up and realized she was happy. Not content. Not satisfied. Actually happy. She was building manuscripts, databases from the Blackwood Library, consulting for 3 universities, writing a book on authentication techniques, raising a son who was bright and wild and occasionally terrifying, and she was doing it with a partner who'd learned to listen. It wasn't the life she'd imagined at 26. It was better. The final piece fell into place on Thomas's 5th birthday. The party was huge. Staff, tenants, neighbors, business associates. The gardens were full of people and laughter and the kind of chaos that happens when you invite 50 people and 40 of them bring children. Thomas was in heaven, running wild with a pack of other boys, covered in cake and grass stains. Lyra watched from the terrace, Adrian beside her. We did that, he said. We made him happy. We did. Think we can keep doing it? She looked at him, really looked, At the man who'd spent 3 years learning to be better, who showed up for every school event, every scraped knee, every bedtime story, who asked her opinion and actually listened to the answer. "Yes," she said, "I think we can." That night, after the guests left and Thomas finally crashed from sugar exhaustion, Adrian asked her to walk with him. They ended up at the cottage, the small house he'd built for her 3 years ago. "I've been thinking about this place," he said. "What about it?" "What it represented: safety, separation, proof that you didn't need me." "I didn't. I don't." "I know. That's what makes this work. You're here because you choose to be, not because you have to be." "Is there a question coming?" He pulled a small box from his pocket. "There might be." Ilara's heart stopped. Inside was a ring. Not the ostentatious Blackmore family heirloom he'd given her the first time, something simpler, a sapphire set in gold. "This was my mother's," he said. "Not the official jewelry, just something she wore because she liked it. I thought—" He stopped. "I thought maybe you'd want something that was chosen, not inherited." "Adrian, I'm not asking you to marry me again. We're already married. Legally, technically. The annulment never fully processed. I may have slowed that down intentionally." He smiled slightly. "I'm asking you to choose it. Choose this. Choose us. Not because you have to, because you want to." Ilara looked at the ring, at the cottage, at the man who destroyed her and then spent years learning to build her up instead. "You know this is insane," she said. "Completely. We failed once, spectacularly, and we learned, and we're better now. We might fail again. We might, but I'd rather fail trying with you than succeed at anything else." She took the ring, slipped it on her finger. It fit perfectly. "Yes," she said, "I choose this. I choose us. But Adrian—" "What?" "If you ever make me feel invisible again, I will burn this house down." He laughed, real laughter, full and honest, fair. "And if you ever leave without telling me why, I will hunt you down and beg you to explain. Also fair." They stood in the doorway of the cottage she didn't need anymore, wearing a ring she'd chosen, planning a future neither of them had expected. It wasn't the ending Ilara had imagined when she left Blackwood Manor 4 years ago. It was better. Because she'd left as someone's wife. She came back as herself. And that made all the difference. Years later, when Thomas was grown and running the estate with the kind of compassionate competence his parents had learned together, someone asked Ilara about her story. "You left a lord," they said, "built a business from nothing, then went back. Why?" Ilara thought about the girl she'd been, silent, invisible, desperate to please. She thought about the woman she'd become, sharp, successful, certain of her value. "I didn't go back," she said. "I moved forward, and he came with me. What's the difference?" "Going back means returning to what was. Moving forward means building what could be." She smiled. "I walked away with nothing and came back with everything, not because he gave it to me, because I claimed it for myself." "And the marriage? The second time?" "There was no second time. We're still in the first one. We just both had to die and rebuild before we figured out how to do it right." "That's not very romantic." "No. But it's honest, and honest is better than romantic." "Is it?" Ilara looked out the window of her office, the library at Blackwood that had become her headquarters. Thomas was in the garden with his father, arguing about something plant-related, both of them gesturing wildly, both of them grinning. "Yes," she said, "it is." She'd built an empire from manuscripts and stubbornness. She'd raised a son who knew his worth. She'd learned that the greatest power wasn't being loved. It was being seen. And in the end, she'd found both. Not because she needed them, but because she'd become someone worthy of choosing them. The silent girl who'd sat in empty rooms waiting to matter was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew exactly what she was worth and refused to settle for anything less. That was the real victory, not the marriage, not the business, not even the happy ending. The victory was knowing she could walk away from all of it and still be whole. She'd proven that once. She'd never have to prove it again. And that more than love, more than success, more than anything was freedom. The kind you earn, the kind that lasts, the kind that transforms everything it touches, including the people brave enough to claim it.